Walt Disney, the man behind the magic. From creating Mickey Mouse to building Disneyland, he's the face of childhood nostalgia. But behind all the animated characters and iconic theme parks, there's a side to Walt Disney that most people don't know about. He had his own quirks, bizarre habits, and strange beliefs that made him a lot more complex than the person we think of today. In this video, we're revealing 10 weird facts about Walt Disney that you probably didn't know. 10. Walt Disney was afraid of mice as a child. Walt Disney's connection to mice is legendary. After all, Mickey Mouse is the most famous mouse in the world. But did you know that Walt had a fear of mice when he was a child? It seems almost ironic, given that he went on to create the very character that would become a symbol of joy and imagination for generations. Walt grew up on a farm in Missouri, and like many children, he encountered all sorts of animals, including mice. But unlike many kids, Walt developed a strong aversion to them. His fear was so intense that he would often try to keep them out of his home. Fast forward to his career, and Mickey Mouse emerged as one of the most beloved characters of all time, changing Walt's life forever. It's one of those quirky twists of fate that makes Walt's story all the more fascinating. The man who was once afraid of mice became their greatest advocate, creating a legacy that would last forever. 9. He had a private apartment hidden above the firehouse at Disneyland. Walt Disney was known for his grand vision and love for perfection, so it's no surprise that he had a hidden gem right in the heart of Disneyland, a private apartment above the firehouse. This wasn't just any apartment, it was Walt's personal retreat while working at the park. Walt's apartment was modest yet charming, and it served as a place where he could take a break from the stresses of managing Disneyland. But what makes this fact truly interesting is that the lamp in the window of the apartment has stayed lit in his honor ever since his passing. The lamp is a symbol of Walt's presence and legacy, and it continues to shine as a reminder of the man who created the magic. It's a subtle, yet powerful tribute to the vision and dedication that Walt Disney poured into his dream. 8. Walt reportedly had only one favorite meal, chili with beans and crackers. Walt Disney was a man of many talents, but when it came to food, he was surprisingly simple. He reportedly had only one favorite meal, chili with beans and crackers. And here's the kicker. He ate this same meal multiple times a week. This might not be what you'd expect from a man who lived a lavish life, creating theme parks and movies. But Walt wasn't interested in fancy meals or extravagant dishes. He found comfort in the simplicity of chili, a hearty and filling dish that kept him going during long days of work. It's a reminder that even the most visionary figures can have surprisingly down-to-earth preferences when it comes to their personal lives. 7. He was obsessed with model trains and built a half-mile miniature railway in his backyard. Walt Disney's love for trains wasn't limited to his theme parks. He had an obsession with model trains and even built a half-mile-long miniature railroad in his own backyard. This railroad, known as the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad, became one of Walt's most cherished personal projects. The railroad was built in the 1950s and was inspired by Walt's childhood love of trains. It featured a working steam engine, tunnels, bridges, and a full track that wound through his property. Walt even took it a step further, naming the railroad after his home, Carrollwood Drive. The miniature train set became his private escape, a place where he could unwind and indulge in his passion for trains. It also influenced his work on Disneyland's railroad, which remains one of the park's most iconic attractions. For Walt, this love of model trains wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to escape the pressures of work and reconnect with his creative spirit. 6. Disney often talked to his characters out loud while working. Walt Disney was known for his creativity and hands-on approach to his work, and this extended to the voices of his beloved characters. In fact, Walt would often talk to his animated characters out loud while working, which might seem odd to some, but for Walt, it was part of his process. One day, while working at his desk, Walt was heard having a full-blown argument with none other than Donald Duck, or, more accurately, Donald Duck's voice. An employee walked in and was shocked to find Walt animatedly talking to an empty room, mimicking Donald's gruff voice in response. It's just another example of Walt's passion for bringing his characters to life in every sense, even if it meant sounding a bit eccentric to others. This ability to fully immerse himself in the world of his characters and interact with them in such a personal way shows just how deeply Walt cared about the magic he created. It also demonstrates the level of dedication and attention to detail he brought to every project. 5. He wrote with both hands but preferred drawing with his left, and writing notes with his right. Walt Disney wasn't just a visionary, he was also ambidextrous. While many people are limited to one hand for tasks, Walt had the ability to use both hands with skill. However, he did have a preference. He liked to draw with his left hand and write notes with his right. This ambidextrous ability wasn't something Walt ever made a big deal about, but it did help him when it came to sketching out his ideas for new characters and scenes. His ability to seamlessly switch between hands allowed him to be more efficient when working on his creative concepts, though he kept the focus on the ideas themselves rather than his unique talents. Walt's ambidexterity is just another example of how his creative mind worked differently from others, helping him to execute his vision in ways that made him stand out as an innovator in the industry. 4. Walt hated having his picture taken and often ducked behind props or animators during studio photos. Despite being one of the most famous men in the world, Walt Disney wasn't fond of the spotlight. In fact, he hated having his picture taken. At various points in his career, Walt would go to great lengths to avoid the camera, even ducking behind props or other people during studio photo sessions. Walt was extremely private and often preferred to stay out of the public eye, despite the fame that came with being the face of Disney. He wasn't the type of celebrity to seek attention or bask in the glory of being in the limelight. Instead, he focused on his work and let his creations speak for themselves. This avoidance of fame added to the mystique of Walt Disney, making him an even more enigmatic figure in Hollywood. 3. He had a strong dislike for beards and long hair and banned them among Disneyland employees for decades. Walt Disney had a distinct vision for his company, and that vision extended to the appearance of his employees. One of the more bizarre rules he enforced at Disneyland was his strict ban on facial hair and long hair for men. He had a strong dislike for beards, mustaches, and long hair, which he believed were unprofessional and didn't fit the clean, family-friendly image he wanted to project. For decades, Disneyland employees were required to keep a neat, clean appearance, and this meant no facial hair or long locks. It wasn't just a trend, this was a rule enforced by Walt himself, who was very particular about the overall aesthetic of his parks. Employees had to conform to these strict standards to work at the park, and even in the 1960s, the ban remained in place. It's a curious rule, especially considering the laid-back counterculture movements of the time. But for Walt, it was a matter of maintaining the pristine image of Disneyland and keeping it in line with his vision of family-friendly entertainment. 2. Disney used to take afternoon naps in his office behind a secret sliding wall to stay refreshed. Walt Disney's workdays were long and intense, filled with endless meetings, brainstorming sessions, and creative projects. To keep his energy up, Walt developed an unusual habit. He would take afternoon naps in his office, but not just any nap. Walt's office had a secret sliding wall that led to a hidden room where he could rest undisturbed. This private, tucked-away space was Walt's personal sanctuary, allowing him to recharge and stay refreshed for the demands of his creative work. The fact that he took naps in such a secretive way shows how seriously he took his energy and focus. He knew the importance of taking care of himself to stay at the top of his game, and this hidden resting spot became a well-known part of his office routine. Walt's nap room was just another example of how he valued productivity, while ensuring he remained in peak condition to create the magic we know today. 1. He was a chain smoker and tried to hide his habit from the public. Despite his clean and wholesome image, Walt Disney was a chain smoker for much of his life. He smoked up to 4 packs a day at the height of his habit. However, Walt did everything in his power to hide this from the public. When he was photographed, Walt would sometimes go so far as to ask photographers to edit out his cigarettes from the pictures. He didn't want his smoking to tarnish the family man image that he worked so hard to create. It's ironic, given that Walt was the mastermind behind wholesome characters like Mickey Mouse and the Disney princesses, yet he had a personal vice that he kept hidden. It's a reminder that even the most iconic figures have their secrets and flaws, and Walt Disney's attempt to conceal his smoking habit shows that he wasn't always the perfect image of health that we associate with his legacy. Want to discover more bizarre facts about other famous figures? Don't forget to watch the next video popping up on your screen.